Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to look at chapter number 4 of The Ego Tunnel by Thomas Metzinger. This chapter is about agency. There's a lot of stuff to cover, but I'm still going to try and keep this as short as possible. We can start out with the question, what does it mean for something or someone to have a mind of its own? And regarding this question, Thomas Metzinger offers us a couple of statements. First, having a mind means possessing inner states that have content and embedding such thoughts and inner images of the world into a self-model. You also need explicit representations of goal states, that is, your requirements, your desires, your values, what you want to achieve by acting in the world. And you need a conscious ego to appropriate these goal states to make them your own. So in this chapter, Metzinger looks at various aspects of agency, namely bodily agency, attentional agency, and cognitive agency. And we will go through each one of them. I will provide you with a definition for each, show you various aspects of each phenomenon, so to speak, and I will also look at a couple of disorders, let's call them disorders for now, namely attention deficit disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and dementia. What I found useful is to actually produce a chart for each disorder and see, which components of agency are actually working, so to speak, for each disorder and which aren't. And I found this really helpful because it gives you a clear sort of image of where the deficits are, and it also just visualizes the potential deficiency for individuals that suffer from one or the other disorder. So the topic of bodily agency is an interesting one, and Metzinger discusses in detail the condition of alien hand syndrome. That is a condition where one of the hands of the patients would sort of develop a life on its own, so to speak, doing sometimes the opposite of what the right hand, for instance, wants to do. So you would be able to see, for instance, a patient unbuttoning their shirt with their left hand, and the right hand is trying to button it up again. So this phenomenon this syndrome raises a couple of questions. It seems to be a phenomenon where, there is dissociation of bodily ownership or bodily agency. Now, if we want to look at what is happening in alien hand syndrome, Metzinger provides us an explanation. He says there seems to be an isolated functional module in a patient's brain. The goal state driving the alien hand behavior is not represented in the patient's conscious mind. It seems like almost like a little agent is embedded in a bigger agent, a sub-personal entity, so to speak, pursuing its own goals and hijacking a body part that belongs to the patient. The alien hand, however, is not a distinct entity with an ego tunnel, if we follow Metzinger's logic. It is just a body part and it has no self-model. So it does not know about its own existence, and nor does a world appear to it. But due to a brain lesion, it is driven by one of the many unconscious goal representations that are constantly fighting for attention, so to speak, in our brains. So that's pretty much a description of what is going on. And what we can see from the alien hand syndrome is that parts of your body can be dissociated from the entity that seems to be doing the predicting, in your brain. Further, the phenomenal experience of ownership and the phenomenal experience of agency are intimately related, and both are important aspects of the conscious sense of self. What does this mean? It means that your brain, being this prediction engine, at the same time reinforces your sense of being an agent, and the experience of being an agent reinforces the experience of having a sense of self. So it is therefore conclusive that when the prediction engine, i.e. the brain, is somehow compromised or compromised in part, both the sense of agency and also the sense of self are compromised as well, as the first constitutes the latter. So in its origin, the ego is a neurocomputational device for appropriating and controlling the body, first the physical one and then the virtual one. Now, let's turn to a definition of bodily agency. Bodily agency refers to the capacity of individuals to intentionally and consciously control their physical movements and actions. It encompasses the understanding and experience of oneself as the originator of intentional bodily movements. This concept is central to the feeling of owning and controlling one's body and is closely related to the broader notion of personal autonomy and action. Now, as promised, let's quickly look at the various aspects of bodily agency. Those are, and I'm going to show you for the purpose of simplicity and memorability, I'm going to show you, a kind of org chart. So we have agency at the very top, which is comprised of bodily, attentional and cognitive agency, and now we're going to run through the sub-aspects of each type of agency. So bodily agency is comprised of motor control, which obviously is the ability to plan, initiate, execute and adjust physical movements to achieve desired outcomes. We have intentionality, which is the sense that your actions are purposefully directed towards achieving a specific goal. We also have a sense of ownership, so the perception that your body parts and movements actually belong to you. And we have proprioception, which is the awareness of the position and movement of your body parts in space. Metzinger writes, there is a kind of agency even more subtle than the ability to experience yourself as a coherent acting self and the direct cause of change. This is what I call attentional agency. And let's have ourselves another definition. Attentional agency refers to the capacity of individuals to consciously direct and control their focus of attention. This involves the ability to select and prioritize certain sensory inputs, thoughts, or tasks while inhibiting distractions. It's a crucial aspect of cognitive control and executive function enabling people to effectively manage and allocate their mental resources to achieve specific goals. Again, turning to our org chart, key elements of attentional agency include selective attention, which is the ability to focus on particular stimuli or tasks while ignoring others. Sustained attention, the ability to maintain focus over a prolonged period. Shifting attention, the skill to switch focus from one task or stimulus to another as needed. And divided attention, the ability to manage and respond to multiple tasks or sources of information simultaneously. With regards to cognitive agency, Metzinger writes, there is cognitive agency, an interesting parallel to what philosophers call the cognitive subject. The cognitive subject is a thinker of thoughts and can also ascribe this functionality to herself. In order to have Descartes' experience of the cogito, the robust experience of being a thinking thing, an ego, you must also have had the experience of deliberately selecting the contents of your mind. So let's turn to another definition. Cognitive agency refers to the capacity of individuals to actively and deliberately control and direct their cognitive processes, such as thinking, reasoning, decision-making, and problem-solving. This concept highlights the proactive role that individuals play in shaping their own mental activities and guiding their cognitive functions to achieve specific objectives. And here the key components are self-regulation, which is the ability to manage one's thoughts, emotion, and behaviors in a way that facilitates goal attainment. So this involves monitoring and adjusting cognitive strategies as needed. Second, we have metacognition, which is the awareness of understanding of one's own cognitive processes. This includes the ability to reflect on, control, and enhance one's thinking and learning strategies. We have goal setting, which is the capacity to define and pursue cognitive goals such as learning new information, solving a problem, or making a well-informed decision. We also have strategic planning, which is the ability to develop and implement plans to achieve cognitive goals, including the selection of appropriate problem-solving strategies and the allocation of mental resources. And lastly, we have adaptability, which is the capability to adjust cognitive strategies in response to new information, changing conditions, or feedback. And now I'm going to prompt you a statement that might confuse you a little bit, but it makes absolute sense to actually make it, which is, if the dynamical systems theory is correct, then all of this is a case of dynamical self-organization in the brain. So basically this already hints to the topic of, to the question of, how free we are in terms of how free our free will is actually. So what this means, it's kind of a sobering statement, because on the face of it, it basically says that your brain is a system which is dynamically self-organizing itself, and this sense of self that you have is constructed by all these aspects of agency, So it isn't a thing, it isn't a real thing, it's just something that kind of co-arises with, your sense of self and your sense of being an ego or having an ego just sort of, co-arises with your brain doing its dynamical organizing, so to speak. So, it is what it is, and that's the reductionist view. Now let's look at 3 disorders that I mentioned in the beginning. So let's start off with dementia. You can see in this chart which of the aspects of agency are present. They are present when they are in blue. They are compromised when they are in orange, and they are variable when they are in light orange. So clearly, when a person has dementia, all aspects of agency are at minimum variable, which means they're about to be compromised or apt to be compromised. And what for certain is compromised is the aspect of intentionality. Moving on to attention deficit disorder, or ADD, you can see that bodily agency is the least compromised in ADD. Attentional and cognitive agency, though, are all apt to be compromised, or at least can vary in individuals. So if we move over to autism spectrum disorder, bodily agency is less compromised. Less aspects are compromised, but they are more compromised, or certainly more certain to be compromised than in ADD or dementia. Motor control being your ability to not only execute but also plan and initiate movements is most certainly compromised in people with autism spectrum disorder. Also proprioception, so your sense of position or movement in space. The ability, if we move over to attentional agency, the ability to switch focus from one task to another at will is also compromised. Curiously, when we look at cognitive agency, all aspects except goal setting are variable. So, and we are talking, of course, about a spectrum disorder. So in different individuals, different aspects of agency can be compromised. I did a sort of self-experiment. I came up with my own chart, so to speak, for a high-functioning autism. And this is the picture that I came up with for myself. So what I can say is that with regards to bodily agency, depending on the state of my, I would say, nervous system, depending on how stressed I am, I have varying control over my body. I am less, proprioception to me personally is less of a problem, but motor control can be. For instance, when I go into overload, which is a term in autism, meaning that your nervous system is just sort of beginning to be overloaded. So when that happens, I can, for instance, what happens to me is that when I walk, my left arm will sort of go like this, go up involuntarily every once in a while, which is I mean, it's kind of disturbing in the beginning because you don't have control over it. It's just a movement. It's like a spasm, if you will. It just looks funny to other people, obviously, when you walk around and your arm does things that you can't really control. But I mean, to me, I learned to take it as a sort of, it's almost my thermometer. So when I notice that this is happening, then I know that I'm sort of short of having a meltdown. So it's a good idea to go back home and to lie down and to rest for a while. What happens shortly before I do have a meltdown, so in case I don't make it home on time and I don't have the chance to relax, when my nervous system gets even more strained, I do start to stumble. So I lose control over my legs. My walking becomes robot-like. So I will look like a robot because my legs stiffen up and I start moving like a robot. So it's like it looks really jerky. With regards to attentional agency, the point of selective attention is, or the way I experience it is, I cannot, to me, for instance, all sounds are equally loud. So, and there's a bunch of videos in my playlist, The Science of Autism, which model that experience for you to sort of tune into that kind of experience. It's just that, the chirping of a bird or the crying of a child, or I don't know, any kind of ambient noise is as loud as the noise or the sound that you're trying to concentrate on. So for instance, if I sit here at my desk at home and I'm trying to work and the baby starts crying outside, I'm no longer able to concentrate on my work. So I'll have to shut the window, and I'll have to put on my noise cancellation headphones in order to continue to be able to think, really. So that's really what selective attention means, is you're not able to, or I'm not able to not concentrate on a sort of disturbing stimulus. Shifting attention is an interesting one. I think the phenomenology, to me at least, is that I get really focused on what I'm doing, which can actually also be a skill. You can turn this around and have this be a skill. So when you do something, or when I do something, I tend to get completely focused on it. So and it's hard to move the focus away from that thing that I'm doing at will. So and it goes so far as my tuning out bodily sensations. So basically, for instance, a funny example, I can work for hours on end forgetting that I have to pee or eat, because it's just not that important to me at the time. I'm just going to be focused on my task, which usually is a intellectual task. So, and divided attention, I don't have that much of a problem with that, actually. And if that speaks to the ability to multitask, curiously, I am absolutely capable of multitasking, but it's not good for me. I shouldn't multitask. I learned the hard way. So with regards to cognitive agency, self-regulation is a big deficit to me, especially if I run into a overload of my nervous system. I have a hard time sort of regulating myself down. I do have a couple of skills that I developed over time, but especially when you are in between overload and meltdown, there is just a really short period of time in which maybe it's like 3 seconds before you go into meltdown, which usually is a panic attack. So it's almost like those 3 seconds are just not enough time for you to react accordingly. And when you do go into, meltdown, I mean, you can just, I don't know, for instance, start crying, or become kind of angry. And there's no thing you can really do to, tamper that down in the moment. So you'll just have to basically let it happen and sort of almost like surrender to it, But at least that's how I experience it. Adaptability is a big deficit. So obviously in order to function and maintain a sense of self, if you will, I do need sort of my routine. So I built up a routine for myself, which works really well for me and is comprised of, a bunch of little things that I like to do. And if that routine is somehow compromised by external factors, then I tend to have a problem. So, as you can imagine, if, for instance, you do get, I do have the odd invitation to see relatives and, friends of mine and stuff like that. If I know about the appointment coming up, it starts bothering me about a week beforehand. So I really don't like it because it will mess up my routine. Usually I do enjoy it when I'm there, but it is a total stressor to me, and I'd rather not socialize. So that's just that. That's how I experience autism. Now, the interesting thing about this is that, the takeaway basically is that those subpersonal brain events, those aspects of agency, they do make up together, taken together, they do make up our sense of self. So when one of the subpersonal brain states, when one of these aspects of agency are compromised, then so is your sense of self. So, and I found that really helpful because I've always wondered how it is that I wouldn't have a strong sense of self, and that it just wouldn't seem rational if somebody acted egotistical, for instance. It just doesn't make sense to me, being autistic, because I don't have a sense of self that is that strong. I'm more task oriented, So I just found it interesting to actually come up with such a chart and be able to see what is happening, So this is a first for me, and I'm now 47 years old, so I went through life not knowing about this, and now I do, and it makes me feel good, better. Now, we touched upon the question of how free we actually are, if we think of free will, and how if everything that we experience is sort of like a dynamic self-organization of our brains, then who is the actual agent at the end of the day, And Metzinger goes into this in the last part of this chapter, and I just want to present you with a bunch of statements. He says, from a scientific third-person perspective, our inner experience of strong autonomy may look increasingly like what it has been all along, an appearance only. So that's pretty much that pretty much sums up this notion of we might have been fooled to think that we have a self or an ego, when in fact it's just a dynamic self-organization of our brains. So if one takes the scientific worldview seriously, no such thing as goals exist, and there is nobody who selects or specifies an action. The brain is best described as a complex system continuously trying to settle into a stable state, generating order out of chaos. So, on the one hand, this is a sort of, this type of determinism is really sobering. On the other hand, especially when you think back to these org charts of the different disabilities or disorders, it is a chance for us to develop some sort of empathy. Someone with dementia or ADD or ASD, they can only, obviously they can only act as far as the makeup of their brain allows them to. And especially in cases when such brains act unfavorably, in terms of our societal or moral norms, we probably shouldn't use this evidence as an excuse for their actions if they are immoral, but we can certainly use them as explanation. And so having this kind of knowledge actually also allows us to start to think about better accommodations of people with such brain lesions, and of maybe more effective therapies, And it also begs the question of therapeutic goal, because if you think about it, someone with a naturally diminished sense of self, going into talk therapy, for instance, will find themselves fighting an uphill battle right from the start, because the supposed goal state of being of having a strong sense of self that is untainted of prior experiences is almost unattainable to begin with, because of the makeup of your actual brain. So this points to that we probably should develop different therapeutic approaches for people with ASD or ADD and disorders like that. The next chapter will focus on the dream state, and this might give us a deeper insight into also another insight into what our true subject is and when it emerges. And I'm looking forward to that chapter. I hope you can take something away of today's discussion. Thank you for watching, as always, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.